She's a rebel with a cause, and now a victory under her belt. Hollywood actress Rebel Wilson today winning her epic defamation trial against Bauer Media, the company found to have published a series of malicious and damaging articles.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And chalk up one for the little guy over those trashy women's magazines that stretch the truth to breaking point. Sure, she is a millionaire Hollywood actress, but Rebel Wilson risked all against the might of Bauer Media, and after weeks of courtroom drama, she emerged victorious.
Far too often, I feel that tabloid magazines and the journalists who work for them don't abide by professional ethics. Far too often, I feel that their conduct can only be described as disgusting and as disgraceful. I'm glad, very glad, that the jury has agreed with me. And by their unanimous, overwhelming verdict, they have sent a very, very clear message.
And clear it was. The six-woman jury decided on Thursday it had no doubt the star was viciously defamed by a series of articles in Woman's Day and other Bauer magazines that had portrayed Wilson as a liar and a fantasist.
Among the defamatory claims made in articles published by Woman's Day magazine were that Rebel was not her real name, she lied to journalists about being 6 years younger than she actually is, and that she also lied about being related to Walt Disney.
It was a Woman's Day splash in 2015 that sparked the action. And as the court heard, it provides a fascinating case study of how the gossip mags ply their trade.
Just who is the real Rebel?
She's clearly got a vivid imagination, laughs our source. Maybe you have to tell stories to make it in Hollywood.
So, who was the source? Surprisingly, the magazine actually had one. A still unidentified classmate who contacted Women's Day via its website in 2012. Reporter Sharon Amensic began negotiating with her the following year, the source demanding payment for dirt and old photos, but rejecting an initial offer of $500. Then more photos and information arrived, and the offer was bumped up to $3,000. But in November 2013, a nervous Amensic emailed the source to say,
"We've come into some problems about the story. We've been doing research, and there are a lot of articles where they do put her age as 33, and some where she says her real name is Melanie, etc. If she hasn't been lying as such, it will be hard to do the story."
Shortly after that, Women's Day claimed, falsely as it turned out, that they were ditching the story on legal advice.
"We sat with lawyers and unfortunately the information can't be used in a story because it's too problematic. But due to all your troubles and being so kind, we would like to pay you $1,000 for the tip-off."
That should have been the end of it, or so you'd think. But 18 months later, in 2015, Amensic hit the source's inbox again.
"My editor asked me to get back in touch with you because she'd love to do a fun story on all the facts you supplied about the real Rebel Wilson."
And why the change of plan? Because Rebel had a film coming out, and it was just the perfect time. But while Women's Day editor-in-chief Fiona Connolly loved the dirt file, she told Amensic she was still
worried about legals, as we're calling her a liar based on a woman who won't go public.
So Connolly was suggesting they could have fun with it instead. Yes, really. Keep it vague, don't be too mean, and you'll probably get away with it. But as Matthew Collins QC argued for Wilson,
"We learned in the course of this trial that Bauer Media thinks that magazine reporting is somehow different from other journalism. It is not."
No, it is not, and Bauer have now found out the hard way. Damages are yet to be awarded, but it could be a multi-million-dollar sum, on top of $1 million in costs. No surprise then that other celebrities who've also been monstered by Women's Day or its rivals are celebrating too.
Congrats, Rebel Wilson. They have to be held accountable. Justice is done.
Congrats, Rebel Wilson. Woman's Day has been a disgraceful magazine for a long time. Hopefully this makes them report facts and stops the rubbish.
And indeed it might do just that, or at least make them a lot more careful before they make up their stories. But if it does have that effect, how on earth will they fill their trashy mags? But now to troubles in TV land and last week's sudden collapse of Channel 10.
The Network 10 board has placed the company into voluntary administration after being left with no other choice. The company maintains its business as usual and viewers won't notice any changes. But the move sent shockwaves through the industry and Parliament House.
The good news is 10 is still on air and will almost certainly survive. The bad news for James Packer, Lachlan Murdoch, Bruce Gordon and Gina Reinhart is that they have lost almost $1 billion between them. while 17,000 smaller shareholders have also lost at least another $1 billion in what the Finn's Joe Aston last month described as
the greatest money pit in Australian corporate history.
So, who is to blame? Well, take your pick from Netflix, Stan, YouTube, and the difficulties of running Australia's weakest commercial network. But don't ignore Lachlan Murdoch, who was Ten's chairman for 2 years and CEO for 1 year, helped steer it onto the rocks. Ten's collapse on Wednesday was triggered by 3 of its 4 billionaire shareholders, Murdoch, Packer and Gordon, withdrawing their support for the network, which needs to pay back a $200 million overdraft facility in December. But it was hurried on by Murdoch and Gordon threatening to sue Ten's directors for trading while insolvent if they allowed the network to draw down any more cash.
That threat was contained in a letter sent to the Ten directors on Monday night at 9 p.m.
So, why did Gordon and Murdoch force Ten to call in the knackers, given that the directors claimed in a statement to the Australian Securities Exchange that they had found savings of $50 million to $80 million a year to keep Ten alive? One answer is it allows the 2 billionaires to control Ten's fate. Another is it puts pressure on Parliament to change Australia's media laws.
Network 10's announcement today that it will enter voluntary administration is a wake-up call for opponents of media reform.
If Murdoch and Gordon are to end up owning Ten, which seems to be their game plan, the media laws will need to be changed. Gordon needs the so-called reach rule to be scrapped because he already owns a regional TV station, Win, and can't own Ten as well. Murdoch needs the much more contentious 2 out of 3 rule to go because he already owns a radio station, Nova, and big city newspapers through News Corp, and the rule does not allow him to also own a TV station. Or not yet. So, could Ten be the game changer?
Collapse may force media law changes. Just hours after Australia's third largest TV station moved into administration on Wednesday, the Nick Xenophon team confirmed its in-principle support for the legislation.
Just 3 crossbench senators are now needed to get the media reform package through the Senate at last, and all eyes are on One Nation. So far, Pauline Hanson has refused to back any reform that gives more power to News Corp. But on Thursday, she was reportedly reassessing her position. Then, next day, One Nation's James Ashby told Fairfax,
There is no shift and not likely to be one. We agree with every measure, except removing 2 out of 3.
We'll see if One Nation holds its nerve and if it demands a price, such as cuts to the ABC. Meanwhile, the government and Australia's mainly male media moguls, who lobbied Parliament 2 weeks ago, are pushing hard for reform. And on Thursday, Ten's Sarah Harris added her own self-interested plea.
Today we call on Bill Shorten, Pauline Hanson and the Greens to reconsider their positions and support local jobs. Politicians have been warned of the dire consequences if media laws aren't changed, and yesterday those predictions were proven correct. It's now more important than ever that you make these changes before it's too late.
In fact, Ten could easily survive whether the reforms go through or not. As one former Ten executive told MediaWatch,
a low-cost Ten could easily be profitable, even with a 15 to 20% share of the TV ad market, and it's currently got 24%.
But whatever happens, there will be changes. As the Fin warned last week,
News Corporation is attempting to tighten its grip around the Ten network, with Sky News executives believed to have pitched an integration of the subscription news channel's service with the free-to-air broadcasters' news bulletins.
Yes, it's no done deal, but we could see Sandra Sully, Hugh Remington and Stephen Quatermain, plus Sky's David Spears perhaps, still fronting a Ten News, but sourced from Sky, giving yet more power to News Corp without media laws being changed. But if changes do go through, News Corp is tipped to be Ten's new owner. However, Bruce Gordon also wants the network, and our ex-Ten insider suggests News may just let him have it, asking,
why would News buy the worst house on the street? That's not their style.
The suggestion is News would like Channel 9 instead, which would come with TV rights to the NRL and be much more use to Foxtel and News Corp's tabloids, which rely so heavily on footy. And that could leave Ten as a low-cost network run by Win's Bruce Gordon, perhaps showing reruns of Flying Doctors and other classics from the Crawford Library, which he owns. Only kidding, we hope. But now to another long-running saga, which some hope is finally nearing a conclusion, and that is the national energy debate.
After a decade-long policy blackout, this man could be the political circuit breaker.
Will this end the climate wars, Professor?
Looking forward to briefing the Prime Minister and Ministers.
Chief Scientist Alan Finkel has been charged with creating a national blueprint to provide electricity reliability, sustainability and affordability.
10 days ago, the country's chief scientist came up with a plan to end the stalemate on Australia's energy policy. And last Monday, he had high hopes for his report, telling Q&A,
I just deeply hope that this is used for constructive purposes. Our report shouldn't be used as a battering ram or a cricket bat to score political points.
So, how is it shaping up? Well, let's tune into the shock jocks on Sydney's top talk station 2GB, starting with Alan Jones, who dismissed Finkel before his report was even released.
Oh dear, this review of the future security of Australia's electricity market by the chief scientist, I have no faith in this bloke at all. Finkel claims his new scheme will not only reduce CO2 emissions but drive down power prices. Is this bloke living in some dream world? Drive down power prices? Forget it. This is another unbelievable mess. I would scrap the lot of it.
By Monday, former PM Tony Abbott was also in position to deliver his verdict along similar lines. He told Ray Hadley that a clean energy target was
effectively a tax on coal, and that's the last thing we want.
On Tuesday, midday presenter Luke Grant added his voice to what passes for debate on Macquarie Radio, saying the thinking behind Finkel's low emissions target was
to jack prices up forever and the hell with the coal industry, and it's all right if elderly people can't afford to run a fridge. Well, that's, part of the deal with climate change. I mean, that's crap. And someone's got to call this mob out rather than just go on, yeah, go the environment. That's rubbish.
And next day, to provide some balance from another expert, Grant followed up with some insights from regular commentator Prue McSween.
I mean, it's a ship of fools leading us down the gangplank and plunging us further into the depths of debt. We're paying these exorbitant energy bills because we've got this feel-good climate change wank. And let's face it, that's what it is.
Meanwhile, Chris Smith, filling in for Alan Jones on the breakfast shift, was in such a funk over Finkel that he reckoned it was time for another people's revolt.
Now, if you cast your mind back, you'll remember the rallies that took place against the proposed carbon tax, rallies that I helped engineer and attended. Well, they could be back on the agenda again, this time in relation to low emission targets.
Yes, who could forget? Back in 2011, Smith junked any notion of journalistic impartiality and became a cheerleader for demos against Julia Gillard's carbon tax. And here he is, back in 2011, rallying the troops behind a joint 2GB attack.
I've had a discussion personally with Alan Jones. I've had a discussion personally with Ray Hadley. I've had a discussion personally with Ben Fordham. They are all keen, if we can organise the logistics for the four of us to broadcast that day at that rally outside Parliament House. Send the message around. It's stopcarbonlies.com. That is where you can book to jump on a bus in your neck of the woods to get to Canberra.
In the end, 2GB management tried to stop its stars from taking part, and Smith was the only one who did. But 6 years on, it's clear the climate at the station has not changed one bit. So, why does it need to? Well, almost all the world's climate scientists say we need to slow down global warming. And that's why Australia is one of 148 nations that has ratified the Paris Climate Agreement, in which we have promised to reduce our emissions. Australian business leaders are also overwhelmingly behind a low emissions policy, and Australian energy providers say 10 years of inaction and climate war is a key reason why power prices keep rising. But why believe any of them when you've got the shock jock geniuses at 2GB ignoring all the evidence and telling Australia what we need to do? And you can read more about tonight's stories on our Facebook page or our website, where you can get a transcript and download the programme. You can also catch up with us on iView and contact me or MediaWatch on Twitter. And don't miss Media Bites every Thursday on Facebook, Twitter and our website, and also on iView. But for now, until next week, that's all from us. Goodbye.